Facing a midlife crisis? Find courage in everyday women's stories. Subscribe to Resilient Women Rising.
The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marjorie Marge Tilden, 52, stood in the break room of St. Luke's Hospital in Pittsburgh, her hands trembling around a lukewarm cup of coffee. The head nurse's words still stung. "We're downsizing, Marge. Your position's being cut." After 28 years as a pediatric nurse, she was out. No warning, no severance, just a cardboard box for her stethoscope and a faded photo of her late daughter, Ellie, taped to the inside of her locker. At 52, Marge felt like the world had pulled the rug out from under her. She'd raised Ellie alone after her husband walked out, pouring every ounce of herself into nursing and motherhood. Now, Ellie was gone, lost to leukemia at 19, and the job that had kept Marge afloat was gone too. She drove home through the gray drizzle, the box rattling in the passenger seat of her beat-up Toyota. Her row house on Verona Street, a narrow strip of working-class Pittsburgh, loomed dark and silent. Inside, she dropped the box on the kitchen counter and sank onto the couch, staring at the peeling wallpaper. What now? Her savings were thin, her knees ached from years on her feet, and the idea of starting over felt like climbing Everest in flip-flops. She wasn't young anymore, wasn't tech-savvy, wasn't anything special, just a nurse who'd outlived her usefulness. The next morning, Marge shuffled to the corner store for milk, her head down against the wind. Kids raced past, their backpacks bouncing, shouting about a school project. She paused, watching them disappear around the bend. Ellie had loved school, always dragging home books and half-finished essays. A memory flickered Marge sitting at the kitchen table, helping Ellie with homework, explaining fractions with apple slices. She'd been good at that, teaching, breaking things down. Could she still do it? Back home, she dug through the box from work, pulling out a crumpled flyer she'd grabbed from the hospital bulletin board months ago. Volunteers needed after-school program at Verona Street Community Center. Her pulse quickened. Maybe she could help kids again, not as a nurse, but as something else. She smoothed the flyer, grabbed her coat, and headed out before doubt could stop her. The community center was a squat brick building with flickering lights and chipped paint. Inside, a harried woman named Rosa greeted her. "You're a nurse? Perfect. These kids need someone who can handle chaos." The after-school program was a mess. 30 kids, ages 8 to 14, crammed into a room with outdated books and one ancient computer. They were loud, restless, and mostly from families like Marge's, had been scraping by, overlooked. Rosa explained the budget was slashed, leaving no paid staff, just volunteers like Marge. Her first day was a disaster. The kids ignored her, tossing paper planes and arguing over the computer. A boy named Jamal, 12, with a chipped front tooth, smirked. "You're too old to boss us around." Marge's cheeks burned, but she didn't snap. She remembered Ellie's tantrums. Patience had always been her strength. She sat beside Jamal, picked up a battered math book, and said, "Bet I can make this funner than your video games." He scoffed, but stayed. She started small, using tricks from Ellie's school, days drawing diagrams on a whiteboard, turning fractions into pizza slices. Soon, Jamal and a few others were hooked. Word spread. Kids who'd skipped the program started showing up, curious about Nurse Marge. She taught them math, reading, even basic science with scavenged supplies, baking soda volcanoes, paperclip circuits. The room buzzed with energy, and Marge felt a spark she hadn't in years. But challenges piled up. The center's funding dried up further. Rosa warned it might close. The kids struggled. Some couldn't read at grade level. Others acted out from hunger or stress at home. Marge's own doubts gnawed at her. What was she doing? She wasn't a teacher, had no degree beyond nursing school. And then there was the city council meeting she stumbled into, where slick suits discussed redeveloping Verona street code for tearing down the center for condos. The kids would lose their lifeline, And Marge would lose hers, too. One night, after a girl named Tasha broke down, crying over a spelling test, Marge sat up late, Ellie's photo in her lap. "I can't fix everything, baby," she whispered, "but I can fight for them like I fought for you." The next day, she rallied the kids. "We're gonna save this place," she said. They stared wide-eyed but nodded. She taught them to write. Letters, messy, heartfelt pleas to the council about why the center mattered. Jamal's read, "Nurse Marge makes me feel smart." Don't take that away. Marge took it further. She knocked on doors, talked to parents, even cornered the grocer for donations. She learned to use Rosa's laptop, posting grainy videos of the kids' projects on a free site called Verona Voices. Views trickled in 10, then 50, then 200. A local reporter saw it, ran a story. Nurse turned tutor fights for kids. Donations poured in crayons, books, $20 bills. But the council vote loomed, and the developers had deeper pockets. The night of the hearing, Marge stood in the packed city hall, her knees shaking. She'd never spoken in public, never been that person. The kids sat behind her, clutching their letters. Developers in suits droned about progress. Marge's turn came last. She gripped the podium, voice cracking. "I'm Marjorie Tilden, 52, a nurse with no job. These kids gave me purpose again. This center's not just a building. It's where they learn they're enough. You take it, you're taking their shot." She held up Jamal's letter, hands steady now. "Read this before you vote." The room went quiet. A councilwoman dabbed her eyes. The kids clapped, loud and wild. The vote was close 4-3, but the center stayed. Cheers erupted. Jamal hugged Marge so hard she nearly fell. The victory wasn't just survival, it was a beginning. Donations kept coming, enough to hire Rosa part-time and fix the roof. Marge started a tutoring program, training volunteers with her nurse's precision and mother's heart. A year later, at 53, Marge stood in the refurbished center, watching Jamal explain fractions to a new kid. The walls were bright with murals. The kids had painted pizza slices and volcanoes. Verona Voices had thousands of followers. A college offered Marge a scholarship to study education, stunned by her impact. She hadn't said yes yet, still felt too old, too ordinary, but she was thinking about it. That night, she sat on her couch, Ellie's photo beside her. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It hummed with purpose. Marge wasn't just a nurse who'd lost everything. She was the voice of Verona Street, a woman who'd turned grief into grit, failure into fight. At 53, she'd rewritten her story, and the kids, too. The future wasn't a mountain, it was a path she'd already started walking.